found yourself just staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., totally unable to sleep because your brain is doing somersaults over something you're worried about? Or, maybe you've felt that sudden, overwhelming rush of a panic attack in the middle of a crowded room. Listen, if you have, you are definitely not alone. We are literally living through what experts call an anxiety epidemic right now. It honestly feels like excessive worrying is just the baseline for modern life. But what if I told you that all this worrying isn't just some unavoidable side effect of the modern world, but actually a tricky little mechanism your brain uses to avoid feeling anxious?
Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going on a really fascinating journey based on the groundbreaking work of Dr. Judson Brewer. Our main goal here? Demystifying anxiety. We're going to pop the hood on our own minds, take a really close look at the neural machinery driving our panic, and, best of all, actually learn how to fix the glitch. We'll be exploring how treating anxiety with mindfulness can genuinely lead to a much less anxious future for us all. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with your brain on anxiety, then we'll unpack the anxious habit loop, escape the autopilot trap, rethink your brain's rewards, discover curiosity as a superpower, and finally, wrap up with practicing anxiety sobriety. I promise you, even though anxiety can feel like this massive, overwhelming storm, we've got a really clear, structured, step-by-step repair manual to help you get through it.
All right, part 1, your brain on anxiety.
So the very first thing we absolutely need to get straight is that anxiety is not a character flaw. It's not some kind of weakness. It is quite literally a biological tug-of-war happening inside your head. On one side, we've got our modern rational brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part that handles all the planning, reasoning, and predicting the future based on past patterns. But on the other side, we have the older, much more primitive survival brain, which is controlled by the automatic nervous system. This is the guy that triggers your fight, flight, or freeze response just to keep you alive. Think back to the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember the massive panic buying at the grocery stores? The great toilet paper hoarding? That was a perfect real-time example of the rational prefrontal cortex just totally shutting down because it couldn't predict what the virus was going to do. It threw its hands up and completely handed the steering wheel over to the primitive survival brain, which was basically just screaming, "Threat, protect yourself right now." You see, you really can't just talk or reason your way out of that kind of survival mode. We have to literally reprogram it.
Which brings us to part 2, the anxious habit loop.
To reprogram the brain, we really need to understand the specific error code that's driving our panic in the first place. And here is a massive paradigm shift for you. Worrying itself is actually a compulsive addiction. Now, I know when we think of addiction, we usually picture extreme stuff, right? Like gamblers losing their life savings or severe drug use. But think about how hard it is to put your phone down and stop scrolling social media when you know you have work to do. Worrying acts in the exact same way. It's a compulsive behavior that we indulge in just to temporarily distract ourselves from an unpleasant initial feeling. When you feel anxious, it's uncomfortable. So worrying steps in as a distraction. It numbs the emotion. But here is the really perverse twist. Your survival brain learns that worrying gives you a tiny bit of temporary relief, so it actually triggers more worry every time you feel anxious. Ultimately, this just drives your overall anxiety levels through the roof. This super destructive cycle functions in 3 simple steps: trigger, behavior, and temporary relief. Let's talk about a guy named John. From the outside, John looked like he had a pretty severe drinking addiction. But when he actually sat down and mapped out his habit loop, he realized his trigger was work anxiety. His behavior was drinking, and the temporary relief was the numbness and distraction that the alcohol provided. He was totally stuck in this loop. So the absolute first step to fixing your own anxiety is doing exactly what John did. You've got to map out your own habit loops. Literally write them down. Now, a quick warning. When you do this, you're going to feel this huge urge to try and fix them immediately. Resist that urge. You can't just casually swap out a bad habit for a good one because these neural pathways are so deeply ingrained. You have to change your entire perspective on them first.
Moving on to part 3, escaping the autopilot trap.
To really grasp why these habit loops are so incredibly stubborn, we have to look at the environment where they thrive. And honestly, that environment is our sheer lack of present moment awareness. 50%. According to a 2010 study out of Harvard University, we are living our lives on autopilot roughly 50% of the time. 50%. Can you imagine waking up every single day with all your memories completely wiped out overnight and you actually had to relearn how to eat breakfast or how to unlock your phone from scratch? Life would be totally untenable. So yeah, autopilot definitely has its benefits, for sure. But it also means we are often completely blissfully unaware of our own destructive thought processes.
Let's geek out on the mechanics of this for a second. When we are cruising on autopilot, a part of our brain called the default mode network, or DMN, activates. This is the network that's running the show when you're daydreaming or, you guessed it, worrying. This network specifically stimulates a hub in the brain called the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC. That PCC, that's the engine fueling those persistent obsessive thoughts that make anxiety so impossibly hard to shake. But here is some seriously amazing news. Dr. Judson Brewer and his team ran an experiment and proved that mindfulness training, which is simply the process of becoming actively conscious of what's happening in your mind, actually decreases the activation of the PCC. Mindfulness literally, physically turns down the volume on the exact brain region responsible for obsessive thinking. How cool is that?
Let's shift gears to part 4, rethinking your brain's rewards. If we want to ditch these old, unhelpful mental habits, we really have to address the outdated software in our brains that decides what is and isn't a reward. Imagine I offer you a slice of rich chocolate cream cake or a plate of steamed broccoli. Let's be real, your brain is probably screaming for the cake. Why? Well, because it has high calories. And your primitive brain holds this super outdated, stored idea that associates calorie-dense cake with celebration and ultimately survival. But reality check, the broccoli is what offers the actual long-term nutritional reward. Our brains are constantly storing these totally outdated ideas about how rewarding a bad behavior actually is. This is where mindfulness comes in. It helps us focus on the actual present experience. When you really pay attention, you almost always realize that indulging in your anxious habit loop isn't actually enjoyable at all. It's an illusion. And once your brain truly realizes a behavior isn't actually rewarding, it naturally just wants to do it less. Now, as you start analyzing your habits like this, things might get a little uncomfortable. Your critical inner voice is absolutely going to activate. It's going to start whispering things like, I'm a loser, I can't change, this isn't working, trapping you in this awful cycle of self-flagellation and hopelessness. When that happens, you have to practice not taking yourself so seriously. Just take a breath and tell yourself, well, there goes my silly brain again. You really have to cultivate a compassionate growth mindset here. Always remember, your brain isn't trying to torture you on purpose. It's just clumsily attempting to help you survive based on some really outdated programming. Let's look at part 5, curiosity as a superpower. If we are ditching the old, broken rewards, we definitely need a new one to take their place. And this right here is the ultimate hack to rewire your brain. Think about young children for a second. They have this natural, boundless curiosity about absolutely everything they observe. They ask a million questions about the world just for the sake of knowing. In psychology, this is called interest-based curiosity. It's learning without an agenda, and it keeps you totally focused on the details of the present moment. When you start breaking your old, anxious habits, your survival brain is going to freak out a little bit because it's suddenly in uncharted territory. But instead of giving into that stress, deploy this superpower. Step back and use a genuinely curious mindset to simply observe the physical feelings in your body. When you do this, your mind quickly learns that curiosity feels significantly better. It's a far superior reward compared to the constant state of panic it used to default to. Finally, part 6, practicing anxiety sobriety. All right, this is where we open up the user manual and deliver the practical toolkit you can use in your daily life. Think about Alcoholics Anonymous. In AA, participants aren't told to focus on a massive, overwhelming lifetime of sobriety. That's just way too much pressure. They are simply asked one question: can I stay sober today? We need to apply this exact same approach to our anxiety. Trying to figure out how you're going to defeat every single future anxious habit loop for the rest of your life? Yeah, that is only going to trigger massive panic right now. You just have to take it one day at a time, trust in your resilience, and lean into whatever worry you're experiencing right now. And here is exactly how you do that, using what's called the RAIN approach. That's R-A-I-N. First, you recognize the difficult feelings that are developing. Second, you consciously accept and just allow them to exist without fighting them. Third, you investigate the actual physical sensations happening in your body using that awesome curiosity superpower we just talked about. And finally, you note what is going on as a totally neutral observer. Try to pair this with slow, deep breathing. This keeps your concentration anchored securely in your physical body rather than getting swept away in your swirling thoughts. This RAIN method, literally step by step, pulls your brain right out of its panicky survival state. Look, if you hit a wall while doing this, please remember that hopelessness and self-criticism are really just other survival mechanisms. They are just trying to pull you back into the familiar, comfortable loop of worry. You don't have to get lost in that despondency cycle. You have the tools now to replace it with a much better reward. Offer yourself some kindness, or honestly, just have a really good laugh at yourself and the funny, primitive ways your brain tries to protect you. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Do you now have the ability to step back and ask genuinely curious questions about your own feelings and physical sensations? How will you apply this interest-based curiosity to your own mind today? Because the moment you choose curiosity over panic, your anxiety sobriety has officially begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep learning.